The air, thick with the cloying sweetness of honeysuckle, turned frigid. Laughter from the backyard barbecue faded into a blurry din, replaced by a different sound, one that sent a shiver crawling down her spine, the distinct click of a camera shutter. She turned, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but the encroaching shadows held no silhouette, only the rustling of leaves whispering secrets in the night. The unease lingered, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Had she imagined it? A trick of the light, perhaps? She chided herself for being silly. Family gatherings always had a way of fraying her nerves. Still, she couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, the sensation of eyes boring into her back like hot coals. The laughter from the party now felt distant, a world away from the cold fear that had wrapped its icy fingers around her. She longed to retreat into the safety of her apartment, to lock out the night and the unsettling feeling that clung to her like a shroud. The days that followed were a blur of unease. Sleep offered no escape, haunted by nightmares of watchful eyes and the incessant clicking of a camera shutter. Her once familiar routine now felt tainted, each shadow a potential hiding place, each unexpected noise a cause for her pulse to quicken. The fear, once a fleeting phantom, had taken root in her mind, growing with every passing hour, fueled by a constant stream of what-ifs and imagined threats. She found herself retracing her steps, scrutinizing her surroundings, searching for anything out of place, any sign that would confirm her growing suspicions. The city, once a source of comfort and anonymity, now felt like a hunting ground, its bustling streets closing in on her, each face in the crowd a potential stalker. The rational part of her mind screamed at the absurdity of it all, but the fear, insidious and pervasive, had a logic all its own. The annual family reunion loomed, a stark reminder of the night her world had tilted on its axis. The thought of facing them all, their smiles and forced pleasantries, sent a tremor through her. How could they be so at ease, so oblivious to the darkness that had seeped into her life? Or worse, were they complicit, their cheerful facades masking a sinister truth? She saw them now for what they were, strangers bound by blood and obligation, their relationships a tangled web of jealousy, resentment and long-buried secrets. Each interaction, once mundane, now felt loaded with hidden meaning, every word, every gesture, scrutinized for any hint of malice. The reunion was a minefield of strained smiles and veiled barbs. She felt the weight of their gazes, the unspoken questions hanging heavy in the air. The first email arrived on a Tuesday, a seemingly innocuous message inquiring about her well-being. But something about the tone, the overly familiar salutation, set her on edge. Then came another and another, each one a little bolder, a little more possessive. The messages were always vague, filled with double meanings and veiled threats, leaving her with a gnawing sense of dread. She tried to ignore them, to dismiss them as the work of an overzealous admirer, but deep down, a chilling certainty took hold. She recognized the subtle nuances of language, the telltale turn of phrase, the way certain topics were always carefully avoided. It was him. Her cousin. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, leaving her breathless and terrified. Memories flooded back, seemingly innocuous interactions now painted in a sinister light, his lingering glances, his offhand comments, all pointing towards a dark obsession she had been too blind to see. The evidence, once she started looking for it, was everywhere. Why? The question echoed through her mind, a relentless drumbeat against the silence of her fear. What twisted motives lurked beneath the surface of his seemingly normal facade? Had she been blind, or had he become a master of deception, his true nature so deeply buried that even he wasn't aware of the monster he harbored within? Was it envy? Had her successes, her independent spirit, ignited a jealous rage that festered and grew, morphing into a need to possess and control? Or was it something darker, a twisted sense of entitlement, a belief that she, as his kin, was his to mold and shape according to his desires? This wasn't just about fleeting infatuation. This was about power, about bending her to his will, about crushing her spirit under the weight of his obsession. He was not a lovesick puppy, he was a predator, stalking his prey with a chilling patience, relishing the fear he instilled in her. Fear, for so long her constant companion, began to morph into something else. A slow burn of anger ignited within her, fueled by the injustice of it all. She refused to be his victim, to allow him to control her life any longer. She would not cower in the shadows, paralyzed by his insidious campaign of fear. He had underestimated her, mistaken her kindness for weakness, her silence for acceptance. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. She began to fight back, subtly at first, changing her routines, tightening her social media privacy settings, installing security cameras around her apartment. Each small act of defiance, a victory against the suffocating grip of fear. She immersed herself in self-defense classes, the physicality of it a welcome release for the pent-up tension that coiled tight in her muscles. Days turned into weeks, her resolve hardening with each passing moment. The emails stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that amplified her unease. Had he given up? Or was he merely biding his time, waiting for the opportune moment to strike? The question hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder that the game was far from over. She knew she had to confront him, to rip the mask off and expose him for the monster he was. The family home, once a symbol of warmth and unity, now felt cold and oppressive, the air thick with unspoken truths and simmering resentments. She found her aunt in the living room, her face etched with a weariness that spoke of years spent navigating the minefield of their family dynamics. Before she could speak, her aunt turned to her, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. It wasn't her cousin, it was her aunt. The weight of the revelation pressed down on her, threatening to suffocate her with its sheer absurdity. Her aunt, driven by a mother's love, had become the very monster she had feared. The irony was almost too much to bear. Yet, amidst the anger and betrayal, a sliver of understanding emerged. How far would any of them go to protect the ones they loved? Where did love end and madness begin? The future stretched before her, uncertain and daunting. The legal ramifications, the inevitable fracturing of their already fragile family dynamics, the long, arduous journey to healing and forgiveness. It all felt overwhelming, but she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she would face it head-on. She would not allow this to break her. She would not let the sins of her family define her future.